If you're going to buy or sell, get a real estate attorney, somebody who has experience, somebody who's done it. Many times people are like, oh, it's a family member or a union rep or something. They gave me this attorney who doesn't do real estate, but he's going to give me a better price. I had people come to me and say, can you do a personal injury case for me? I don't do that. Could I scrape my way through it? Sure. But I would tell somebody, if you're really harmed and you need to do that, go to a personal injury attorney.
You are listening to the Dream is Real podcast. This is the place to be if you want to buy, sell, or invest in New York real estate. I'm JD Ambrosio, part of the Dream Select Realty team. And as always, we bring you professionals that are at the top of their game and connected to the real estate industry. I've got two great guests here, actually, our in-house 1-2 punch, so to speak, on the real estate law side of things, as well as title. I have Ralph Pecorale of Ralph H. Pecorale Esquire and David LaForte. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Through a curveball. Normally it's 1-to-1. We've got three guests here today. All right, let's get started on the dynamic between the real estate law side of things and the title side of things. Both extremely important to the transaction.
Yes, we at law offices of Ralph H. Pecorale primarily represent buyers, sellers, banks. And Dave is the office manager here. He also handles all the title review. He works along with equity settlement services in terms of clearing title and things like that. Obviously, title is very important. I would never have a buyer, and a bank won't give a loan without there being title insurance present and paid for. It ensures that the client's in the rightful position lien and that the banks are in the rightful lien position and everything's clear. So,
yeah, with title insurance, whether it's a refinance or a purchase, we'll look at a purchase. There's three backgrounds done. We research the buyers, we research the sellers, and most importantly, we research the property. So we want to make sure that the seller doesn't have anything against them. If the buyers have anything against them, or if the property has anything against, because like Ralph said, a lender wants to come in with a first lien position and make sure that they have clear marketable title. And if any mistakes were made, the title company's on the hook. So that's why it's very critical to have title insurance, whether you're buying or refinancing.
Awesome. So Ralph, let's start. What inspired you to pursue a career in real estate law?
Oh, that's interesting. I actually went to law school with the understanding that I was actually going to become a insurance agent. I mean, I was State Farm Insurance.
Okay.
And took kind of a funky turn at the end there. Had the law degree. They didn't have an agency for me to take on Long Island. They thought maybe I can get one in Jersey because of the way they come up. And I didn't want to do that. They
wanted to banish you to Jersey?
They wanted to move me to Southern Jersey, no less. Not even Northern Jersey, which was probably tolerable. Sorry, all you New Jersey people.
Hey, that's where I'm.
Our whole New Jersey audience that's all right. We're in New York real estate.
They checked right. They checked right out right there. And at the end of law school, I had an opportunity with Christopher Delisle, who is somebody I went to law school with, to take over and not really take over, I should say, start a settlement company with his brother-in-law. His title company. So they needed a couple of attorneys. So Chris and I got involved, starting to do that right out of law school. And I kind of just gravitated towards that. So,
Dave, your role here, you're with us here right in the office on most days. Tell us a little bit more about your side of the coin.
I got out of college and, jumped right into the business. I was a loan officer. I got, my appraisal license. I actually started working for, Ralph mentioned Chris Delisle. I actually started working for these guys part-time doing closings after I was writing loans back in like 2002, 2003. And I've always, kept in touch with them. I wound up going over to Emigrant Savings Bank. I was a wholesale rep for them, but I was still always doing, part-time settlement closings for these guys. I mean, I think I met you in 2002.
I know you're starting to date us a little bit.
Yes, yes. So I guess I went over to the law firm and the title company full time back in I think 2007 or 2008. There was the big fallout. Emigrant Savings Bank laid off all their sales reps, and just like that, the money train shut off. So I had to reinvent myself. The group that I work with right now, good family friends. It's how I got my foot in the door, and fast forward 20 years later, and I'm here. Just continuing to form different relationships and continuing to further my knowledge, and have more of a corner of the industry than I've had in the past.
The great thing, not to cut Dave off, the great thing about Dave's experience too is he's with us through the rises and the crashes. There were two distinct times where the industry just went in the tank. So he's seeing how it works, when there was basically all cowboys out there and you could do whatever you wanted. But now with all the regulations and everything that's put in place, which is nice, he's been through all that, so he's seen it all.
Great. And obviously, depending on who you're talking to, you get a little bit of a different perspective as to the future of real estate, the near future of real estate. Where do you guys see real estate taking a turn, kind of the next season, so to speak?
Well, hopefully with this last election, some of the regulations will come down a little bit, interest rates will come down a little bit, and we'll get some more inventory. Long Island prices are great. The problem is there's not a lot of inventory. So if that can correct a little bit, and that'll probably help if rates come down, you can get more buyers back into the game. I think that's where, at least short term, I think that's where it's going to head for the next 3 to 4 years.
Do you think any of the messaging out there that home ownership is unattainable has affected the buyers maybe not stepping up to the plate?
I think that contributes to it, obviously, but I think more than anything is the interest rates. You got accustomed to 3 or 4 years there where rates were really low, and everybody thinks that 6.5% is a terrible interest rate. When if you go back 20 years, you would have been thrilled at 6.5%. Right. But you also have the change in prices. You could have bought something 20 years ago. You're buying something for $200,000 to $300,000. That's now $600,000 to $700,000.
Right.
So it all offsets each other.
But I mean, you're not of the ilk of saying that home ownership is out of reach, right?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not of that opinion as long as rates stay where they are or go down. All right. I think the rate issue, changing in that payment of, $800 to $1,000 is a big deal. Right. And so if you're borrowing $500,000 to $600,000 at 4%, 4.5%, as opposed to 6.5%, 7%, there's a big difference.
Are you a homeowner who is looking to expand your home so you have enough space for everything you need in your home? Or do you want to renovate because the interior just doesn't work for your needs anymore? Or are you someone who's looking for a property, but nothing that you've been looking at really fits what you need? Well, my name is Catherine Serrano Sosa. I'm the founder of Rooted Architecture Studio, and I can help you bring those renovations and adjustments to life. At Rooted Architecture Studio, we focus on creating meaningful, inclusive, client-centric designs for homeowners and investors. We walk you through the whole process of designing construction and making sure that you understand what's going on, but take away all the layers so you can sit back and just focus on the deliverables of what we're designing. We make sure that your non-negotiables are integrated and your wants and needs are integrated to the best of our abilities. So if you are looking to do anything that I just discussed, or just have ideas that you might want to talk about what the possibilities may be, give us a call and reach out through social media as well, and we'll be happy to help you. And if you're looking for a new property, make sure to connect with Dream Select Realty. They're the right people to help you find the right property for you and make sure that your needs are integrated. Or if we're renovating, we can all collaborate together to bring that vision to life.
And I think what we're trying to do here is remove some of that paralysis. I think whether you're a homeowner that's looking to sell, you're a buyer that's looking to get on the market, or even an investor, sometimes you look at all the factors and sometimes when you look at everything, you don't do anything, right? But from your perspective, getting involved with a real estate attorney, at what point in the process do you think someone in any of those categories, and it may differ by category, would want to engage with professionals like yourself?
I think if someone is out working with an agent, they should have their real estate attorney lined up. It's a very fast-paced business. you find a house today, you make an offer, it could be gone tomorrow. So, I think someone coming in, as soon as they know that they want to buy a house and they're pre-approved and they go through the proper channels to make sure that the affordability is there, they should already have their attorney lined up.
At the very least, they should have had a conversation with an attorney so they know what to expect. At least the attorney can kind of give them an idea of, hey, this is the process. This is the kind of time frame you're on. This is who you need to deal with at these times. Too many people wait till after they make an offer to find their attorney. Right.
Got it.
So that's where there's, a little catch-22. So now they're having that first conversation as they're negotiating a price, and being that there's a lack of inventory, there might be 5 offers on that. You wait too long,
right,
and simply, the property could be gone.
Right. You're getting your ducks in a row, your paperwork together, all that. Time is
correct.
Time is money, but time is really what dictates the transaction sometimes. What could they be doing? And again, it may differ by category, buyer, seller, investor. What could they be doing prior to speaking with the both of you in terms of maybe getting paperwork together or getting even maybe priorities, expectations in line?
Well, the first thing they need to do is know how much they can borrow, what they're going to get approved for. I mean, that's the first thing. Before they're even looking for a house, they should kind of know that so they can get out to see, not waste any realtors' times or anybody else, so that they know exactly what they qualify for. Too many times now, people get into the game and they think they qualify for a $550,000 or $600,000 mortgage, and really they qualify for a $450,000 mortgage.
Got it.
Waste a little bit of time there. So I think that's very important that they do some stuff, do some preliminary discussions with mortgage people, but they also need to do it realistically. Too many times you get a pre-approval based on, hey, this is what I make. It doesn't factor into credit and things like that. And they get a pre-approval that's really not worth the paper it's written on. Investors already have their attorneys lined up. They kind of know, the savvy investor, people that are buying and flipping, they already have their attorney, so they know what to expect. They've been kind of taught they've learned the process, so they're easy. Sellers, for the most part, kind of know what they're dealing with. We said that's an easy conversation. I'm selling it for this price. What are my costs? The buyers, though, especially first-time buyers, which we tend to love, because we can educate them a little bit and teach them the process. And then you also have them for life, usually. All right. You can't make everybody happy, but hopefully if you do the right thing, they stay along for the ride. And when they move up to, they move from the $500,000 house to the $800,000 house to the $1 million house, they stay with you. So the buyers need to really do a little preliminary work to really know where they stand.
Got it. So let's say that they're working with an agent. They've got their pre-approval in place. They even have the house that they want. Transaction's over, right? There's nothing to worry about after that. I'm kidding.
Not necessarily correct.
No, that's really where you two now come in, and it's that middle to home stretch where you can get a lot of things that can pop up. And I think what we try to dispel here is that just because something pops up doesn't mean that it's a disqualifier, doesn't mean that the deal's over, but give us a sense of, and even if it is, and I used the term earlier as law and title being somewhat of a 1-2 punch of kind of how things can develop, and maybe you could both give us perspectives from either side.
Well, I think, and Dave can attest to this in terms of the title. Sellers who have been in a house for X amount of years, they think they know what their title says, but they usually don't. A lot of people do some extensions, decks, things like that, never get it properly CO'd. Those are things that can be corrected. But if there's, liens that they didn't know about in terms of a possible judgment, things like that, tax liens, maybe they're not up to date on their taxes. Those things could come up and put a little bit of a monkey wrench in the whole transaction. But Dave probably could talk more about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think any buyer or seller should, be focused on using a dedicated real estate attorney. It's all happened way too many times with friends and family members that, maybe their cousin just graduated law school and, they're doing depositions and litigations and bankruptcies and foreclosures. They're in court all day. You can't reach them. And it goes back to what we were saying before about, time is money. So if you get an accepted offer and the real estate attorney that you hired is in court all week and you can't reach them because then at night they're home with their families, that's going to cause you the deal. So to go back to your question, if Ralph's representing a seller and, unpaid medical judgments come up, or, there was a bankruptcy that wasn't properly dismissed, your dedicated real estate attorney is going to have more avenues and solutions to try to clear those items on title than somebody else.
I mean, are there ever scenarios where there's more options than you got to pay it?
Nick Cesarini, Weatherstone Mortgage is proud to partner with Dream Select Realty. We understand in this environment how hard it is to find the right home. You really need the right realtor and the right financial tools to be able to make that dream come true. Please reach out to either Dream Select Realty or Weatherstone Mortgage to start the process of that dream.
Yes, definitely. A lot of times with tax, federal tax liens, you can get them to release that property. So that could be negotiated for a fee. Let's say somebody owes $50,000 in tax liens, federal tax liens. Sometimes you pay a small portion of it and get the property released. So there are things like that come up. Okay.
Yeah. Judgments, creditor judgments, those amounts can be, negotiated. The seller really needs to come in though and call these creditors and, try to make arrangements with them. If we're getting to the closing table and maybe the timeline to close is getting thin, the title company is aggressive enough where we'll hold double the face amount. So as an example, if there's $1,000 medical bill and we can't get a proper payoff to satisfy the lien, we'll be aggressive and we'll hold back, say $2,000 in escrow just so we could get to the closing. It winds up being the seller attorney and the title company's problem afterwards, but at least we're still able to close the deal.
So if I'm understanding that properly, it's to make sure that the obligation is funded. This way it can be taken care of at the closing?
To make sure that money's allocated to properly omit the cloud on title. And that's where the holding double, would come into play. The title company is pretty aggressive and, a lot of it is looking at it. And if it makes sense, if there's, just a little bit of risk, we'll still insure it. I mean, we've done things, on the title side and the title company side that not other title companies are going to do because the owner of the title company is an attorney and it's a make sense scenario. So if it makes sense, if the buyer and the seller attorney agree with the solution, then we'll close. It's just there's post-closing items that will have to be done afterwards, but still it allows the transaction to happen, to take place.
I think that's why we appreciate working with you here directly, is because there's a way, within the boundaries of what you can do, and it's a matter of knowing what it's going to take to get it done. So, I think that's a testament to the both of you. Now, just for our listeners, some of these things that we're talking about that can pop up, they're not necessarily always going to be on the credit report, right? There are some things that are outside. So just simply running the credit and saying, I'm pretty clear, there are things that might pop up outside of that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could get a violation from a town for not having your grass cut or garbage outside wasn't removed properly.
I had a friend who had red light tickets, didn't realize, he blames his wife. I think it was probably him, but those were sitting there and they were holding up closing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that definitely happens, and in that situation, it's nice to have a title company that's aggressive, and they'll say, okay, you have 6 of these things, and it's $650 or $700 that's owed. We'll figure it out. We'll hold $1,500 or whatever, and get it taken care of. It won't hold up insuring the property, so it doesn't hold up the loan. It doesn't hold up the bank. The bank only cares that they're in first lien position and that they're protected. God forbid, you don't pay your mortgage, that they can foreclose. So.
And outside of the financial side of the things that could pop up, a lot is also around the property, the surveys, and a lot of what are some of the let's call them momentary roadblocks that could pop up around the property itself.
Well, I have one today. I was reviewing a title today, so just ironically, you asked that. The biggest one on Long Island that we come across, basically property line disputes.
Got it.
And they're mostly minor. Not most people, but a lot of people have fences around their property, and it depends on where they laid that fence out. A lot of times it'll be inside the property line, and if it's more than a foot, title company wants either an affidavit or something, from the neighbor saying that they're not there's no adverse possession. They didn't try to steal the property, that everybody's in agreement. And a lot of times putting up fences, there might be a tree in the way or something like that. That's why you get these fences that are off the line. That seems to be the biggest one, the biggest problem that comes about on Long Island. Most other things, in terms of dormers, decks, pools, things like that. Most of those have, people understand that and they've gone to the town. So at least something's been done. So they're easy to rectify. But the fence one's always a problem, depending on how far it is and everything, how far onto your property it is.
Yeah, the neighbors may not want to sign the affidavits that are given to them. They may want their attorney to review, which is fine. But if you have an attorney representing a purchaser and they're real firm on getting these affidavits signed, those are different things that could in fact hold up a closing. Ralph, have you ever heard of a situation where the neighbor that had the adjacent property, say more property than they should have, have they ever gotten it from the
I've only had that in a commercial transaction. Building, my client purchased the building, then sold the building, and there was a fence that was up there, the whole time. Someone buys the neighbor's, the adjacent property, and came over and said that fence has to come down because it was on their side. And my client actually, who they sold it to, actually went to court, and that fence was up for over 20 years.
Wow!
And it's been paved over and everything else, and they won.
Yeah.
So but usually in residential, it's easier to fix. It's usually an affidavit. And when you're talking about, had a property up in Syosset, and it was like almost 2 acres of property, and the fence was maybe 15 feet over. Nobody really cares about that because of the size of it, but it turned into a little battle because the neighbors didn't like each other.
Well, I would say that dynamic has to come in. I forget who said it, right? Good fences make good neighbors, but let's be honest, sometimes neighbors don't see eye to eye, and when that comes up, I'm sure that can get...
Yeah, that turned into a little bit of a battle, but we were talking about wooded area behind the property, and, it turned into a little bit of a battle, but the neighbor actually, the person buying the house went over and met the neighbor, and the neighbor actually liked them and wanted the other neighbor out. So they eventually, after getting all the documents, they took it to their attorney. They did sign it. It took a little while, but they did.
Got it. So. And can a lot of this be solved by the survey itself? I know some people say, oh, well, there was a fairly recent survey. But would you recommend always getting a new survey?
Hi, my name is Tyrone. I'm the owner and trainer here at Fly Fitness. We work with children of all ages, sports-specific training, soccer, basketball, lacrosse, football, you name it, we do it here. We also work with the beginner, the person that has never been in the gym before. We get you from point A, point B, and we take you through the alphabet of training. We also do rehab, ankles, back, knees, shoulders. The older we get, the more fragile we are. So those things that I just mentioned, those are things that we're definitely going to need help with. That's what we specialize in here at Fly Fitness. Come and join us.
That depends.
Okay.
Well, the survey is what brings out of possessions, into focus. On an existing survey, when an inspection is done, no one's going out to measure. So out of possessions only get brought up on a new survey.
We prefer the use of existing surveys, even if they're a few years old, for that reason specifically. They just go out, they check all the things and say it matches up, and
okay.
So you're okay.
Yeah.
And generally the out of possessions are usually within 2 to 3 feet. They're not extensive. And
I was going to say 15. You mentioned earlier. That's usually
but that was on a huge property, and that's why. But you generally, when you're talking about a quarter acre or a third of an acre, which most of these properties are out here in Suffolk County, you're talking about very minor issues in terms of that's why if it's within a foot of the fence, we just let it go. And the title companies do, and the banks are okay with it. So,
can you comment at all about? I believe it's mainly the South Shore that's affected by this, but some of the wetland scenario, because I know that can get pretty dicey.
In terms of that's really becomes more of an issue when you're building or adding on or doing things. And the wetlands, they prevent you from doing stuff.
Sure.
So that's where that really comes into play. It doesn't really come into play for stuff that's already existing. It's already either been grandfathered in or they allow it, non-conforming use. Generally, that'll come if somebody wants to do a dock back, behind their house or something like that. And there's not a lot of ways to get around that. If they tell you you can't build, it's very difficult to change somebody's mind to that.
Got it. Yeah. But you don't always know that they're going to tell you no, right? You have an area that's, let's say you want to clear and it seems like it's within your fence line. I mean, I'm speaking from knowledge from some associates of mine, where you're looking to clear an area. It's on the South Shore, right on the water, but you've got a decent amount of property. Is that something that they want to look into prior to the purchase?
They definitely should look into it prior if that's something that they're going to want to do after they purchase a property, right? So you're going to buy a property. You know that there's protected wetlands behind you or on the side, wherever it is. They should kind of know where they can go up to and what they can build up to.
Got it.
Okay, and that's easy to do. You go right down to the town. They'll tell you. They'll say this is what you can and can't do. They generally won't put it in writing. They'll just tell you. So. Nobody likes to sign off on that stuff.
Fair enough. What's the most rewarding part of your work?
I think seeing the smile on buyers and sellers' faces when they've gotten to the finish line and they've been able to achieve the goal that they're looking for. Maybe it was for a seller to, relocate, get out of New York, or, a buyer moving into their first house that thought it was impossible. So I think seeing the smiles and, the cooperation and encouragement and people listening to advice that you're giving them to get to the finish line, I think that's the most rewarding.
I would agree. I think my experience has been first-time buyers. I love when first-time buyers, they're thrilled at the end. You've educated them enough so that there's no surprises at the closing table. They had a good experience, and they say, I'm going to refer my friend, my family member, or someone like that. I don't do a lot of advertising at all. My business is almost all referral business. So that's the most rewarding for me, is when somebody says that.
So what would be the one piece of advice that you would give? And again, it may be different. I know you've given a lot of advice so far, but for buyer, seller, investor, maybe we'll touch on investors with the last few minutes that we have here as well. But give one good piece of sound advice for anybody in those areas.
All right. I tell this to people all the time. If you're going to buy or sell, get a real estate attorney. Somebody who has experience, somebody who's done it. Dave kind of touched on this earlier. Many times people are like, oh, it's a family member or a union rep or something. They gave me this attorney who doesn't do real estate, but he's going to give me a better price. Okay. I had people come to me and say, can you do a personal injury case for me? I don't do that. Could I scrape my way through it? Sure. But I would tell somebody, if you're really harmed and you need to do that, go to a personal injury attorney.
Sure. Right?
So the same thing with real estate. There's all niches. Attorneys have niches. Mine happens to be for 25 years, over 25 years. Again, dating myself. Sorry about that. But, I've represented buyers, sellers, and banks for 25 years. I've been through all the changes. I'm going to know and see things that attorneys that are inexperienced aren't going to say. So that's my biggest piece of advice to people. And I've told people that. And I can't tell you how many times people have gone to other people and then they call me up and say, hey, I got a quick question. And I say, well, don't you have an attorney? And they say, yes, but he doesn't know. So I said, so you didn't want to use me because you were saving $250, but yet you're going to call me and ask me questions. Just generally, whatever if you're in a criminal case, you wouldn't hire me to represent you in a criminal case. But real estate, go to a real estate attorney.
That makes perfect sense. Dave, on your side, dealing with the titles and some of what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, what about you? What's the one piece of advice you can give?
Just looking at it from a buyer wanting to purchase, I think they just really need to do their homework to get pre-approved. And we were touching base on a little bit before, to make sure that the pre-approval has substance behind it. Make sure that the buyers gave pay stubs and W-2s to the loan officer. They didn't just say, I make 100,000 when, their W-2 is going to say that they make 75. It's a big difference. So make sure that pre-approval has substance. So when you do know what you qualify for, you're not wasting your time, realtor's time. If an offer is accepted, that the transaction's actually going to go through.
So buying and selling, folks will do that maybe a few times in their life, but for the investor, and we'll kind of close out with this, right? The investor who, I mean, I'm sure that we could all agree, if you're an investor and you're doing transactions more frequently than the general population, you need a team that's going to be there with you, with every transaction. Give us some perspective on that, and maybe how you could partner with an investor to see them hit their goals going forward.
Okay, so I'm going to tie this into a story that happened last week. I get a call on Thursday night from an investor who didn't use me because I will not represent somebody if they don't get title insurance. Because I don't want the call 2 years from now when they can't sell the property because they didn't do something right. They're not insured. So I got a call from a realtor friend of mine who had an investor call me out of the blue. I have dealt with him in the past, but I always tell him he has to have title insurance. So he gave money to secure a deed. Turns out that the sister of this gentleman now is contesting the deed transfer. So he gave the guy it was over $50,000. He gave the guy $50,000 to secure the deed, but did not get a title policy. And he didn't use me because of that, because he knows that I would make him get title. So he calls me and he says, what do I do now? I just got served papers. The sister's contesting this deed transfer. And I said, well, go get your $50,000. It was more than that, but go get your $50,000 back. And, he says to me, well, I can't do that. The guy's telling me he spent a lot of it already. And I said, and you didn't get title insurance, right? You don't have a title policy? He goes, no, I didn't do that. So in that situation, he's basically we're going to be out that money. He's going to sue, or he's going to have to negotiate with the sister now to acquire this property. Otherwise she has a list pendants on the property, which is a claim to the property, and he's tied up. He's jammed. He can't do anything about it.
So he is going to have to negotiate with the sister?
Pretty much. If he wants to acquire the property and protect his investment, that the money that he laid out already, he's going to have to pay her off, and she's going to have to sign off on a correction deed or a second deed. You're releasing the property to him. So in that situation, I mean, investors always, how do I say this? They think they're smarter than they actually are in certain situations. And in this particular, he got burned by it. So, my answer to him was very simple. There's not a lot I can do at this point. If you had a title policy, you would have been protected because they would have defended the action and figured it all out and paid either paid the lady off or negotiated something. So the savvy investor should have a team, attorney, where he gets his money from. A lot of them use their own money. A lot of them use hard money. So you need to have that all in place. Title company that they can work with. I have a couple builders that I represent, and they do everything through equity settlement, the title company that I deal with, for the simple fact that if something comes up, I can walk into the owner's office, which is, in the same building as me, and ask them how we're handling something. A lot of people don't have that relationship with a title company. So, and that's where Dave comes into play also. So, it's the investor needs to get all his ducks in a row before he starts.
Yeah. An average owner's policy, on an all cash deal is $2,000. So maybe in Ralph's scenario that he gave, if that guy spent, using that $50,000 number, if he spent $52,500, he would have still had a piece of the game. It's the risk reward. So definitely trying to cut corners.
Yeah, a lot of people just think that title insurance isn't necessary. Anytime you're dealing with an estate or something like that, title insurance is more than necessary because you never know who's going to come out of the woodwork.
Right.
And in that situation, the son got the property, or so to speak, from the father who passed away, and everybody thought that he was the only one that they had to deal with. But then the sister came out of the woodwork. So
I think it's safe to say whether you're a buyer, seller, or an investor, having the right team around you is important. That's what we try to build here at Dream Select Realty. And, I speak on behalf of LeVar and the team here that we're glad that you're with us. How could someone get in touch with you if they wanted to get started?
Well, like I said, most of my business comes from a referral, but I could give out my email address and phone number. That's where we the call comes in, and then we go from there.
So your website is it crossislandlaw.com?
Yes. It's or they could go right to my email, Ralph P. at crossislandlaw.com. It's the easiest way to get in touch with me, or through the office number, 631-656-5892. That goes directly to myself or my office manager, and Dave will give his information out.
Yep. Same thing. Like Ralph, we don't do really any advertising. It's all referral based. But my email address is dave.laforte@equitysettlement.com. And my direct line is 631-786-8391.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys, for being a part of the program today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Dream is Real podcast. Special thanks again to the both of you. And as always, you can find more resources, and you can find our address where they can find the both of you at dreamselectrealty.com. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at dreamselectrealty, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at dreamselecthome. Remember, the dream is real, and the key to success here, right, is having the right team.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.